Hi everyone, welcome to week 2. For week 2 we're going to deal with two very important concepts that I think you'll really find applicable in your everyday life. The first one's dealing with supply and demand. Supply and demand is focused on the role of prices and how prices are developed in our economy. The other one is looking at elasticity. And elasticity is focused on how consumers respond to price changes. Those are very important concepts that we evaluate, and I think you'll enjoy this week given the ability to really apply these concepts to know why price changes and why firms will raise prices on various goods and services. So now for this week, you're going to be reading chapters 3 and chapter 5. I have some resources that are very important for you to review. You're also going to have discussion for week 2 and homework number 2. Now make sure with the discussion board that you're focusing on your initial post. With your initial post, you need to make sure to have a APA formatted in-text citation and reference to support your work. In your initial post, you need to make sure to have like 3 to 4 paragraphs to really develop the questions. That'll be very helpful in your analysis. Now, when we look at chapter 3, let me open this up here. So now let's look at supply and demand. When we look at demand, demand's dealing with buyers and how buyers respond to price changes, whereas supply is dealing with sellers. And when you look at supply, you look at firms or sellers and how they respond to price changes in the market. When we look at a graph of a supply or a demand curve, you'll notice that it's downward sloping between two variables, price and quantity. So when the price decreases, the quantity demanded will increase. Consumers will want to buy more at lower prices compared to higher prices. Now, one of the resources that I have available for you is the difference between demand and quantity demanded. Whenever we talk about a change in the price of a product, that will be a change in quantity demanded. Whereas when we talk about a change in demand, that will be a shift of the demand curve either to the right or to the left. When we look at supply, supply is going to be an upward sloping curve between the same two variables, price and quantity supplied. You'll notice that firms will want to supply more at a higher price compared to at a lower price, because firms want to sell more at a higher price. They're able to get more for that. When we put supply and demand together, we have what's called equilibrium. When we're at equilibrium, quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied in this graph. You'll notice that supply equals demand. And when supply equals demand, that's very important because that's where buyers and sellers are willing to operate. And that's where they think the best price is. The key is when you get a graph, you're going to have to identify the equilibrium price, which is at $1.40. However, if they give you a price at $1.80, you'll notice at $1.80 that we have 700 million quantity supplied or available units on the shelf for gasoline. 500 million units are available at that price, and people are willing to pay at $1.80. You'll notice that quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded. That's called a surplus. Whenever there's a surplus present in the market, you'll notice that prices will have to decrease to deal with that surplus. Now, if we flip it around and look at if we're at $1.20, at $1.20, you'll notice that 700 million units buyers want to purchase at that price level. Only 500 million units are available at that price level. Now, at that example, there's a shortage that exists. When there's a shortage that exists, you'll notice that that will create a lot of challenges. A shortage will create where buyers want more than sellers are willing to supply. And if that occurs, you'll notice that the inventory levels will be basically gone. And when inventories are gone, you'll notice that suppliers have to get involved to bring about changes in the market price. And they'll have to raise the price. For this unit, you need to make sure to focus on. Let me show you this. This is very important. What will shift the demand curve? So what factors cause the demand to increase, and what factors cause the demand to decrease? Let me see if I can give you to the list of these. If you go right here to your book, you'll notice that you're going to have the factors that will cause the demand curve and supply curve to increase and decrease. Factors that we need to focus on: income, taste and preferences, substitutes and complementary goods, number of buyers, expectations. All of those will cause the demand curve either to shift to the right or to the left. So this is an increase in demand. When it goes to the right, that's an increase in demand. This is a decrease in demand when it goes to the leftward direction. This is an increase in demand. You'll notice the increase in demand is based on these factors right here. Here is a decrease in demand based on these factors. Now when we look at supply, the factors that will influence the supply curve: number of sellers, technology, expectations, input prices, and taxes and subsidies. These will cause the supply curve to either increase or decrease. So let's look at this graph right here. If we look at this supply curve, you'll notice that the supply will decrease in this instance. In this one, supply will actually increase. Shifts to the right, shifts to the left. Now let's go to chapter 5, which is dealing with elasticities. Let me get up here to elasticity. Now, we look at elasticity, we're looking at how consumers respond to changes in the price level. You'll notice that consumers are very sensitive to prices or changes in prices. That's very important to note. There's two types of goods that we look at. We look at an elastic good and we look at an inelastic good. An inelastic good, and here's the example we're going to be looking at, or the calculation. An inelastic good is a good when there's a price change, there's a relatively small change in quantity demanded. Buyers are very sensitive to that price change. Whereas elastic demand, when there's a change in price, there's a very large change in demand. Consumers are very sensitive in the price changes. And when that occurs, you'll notice that consumers have to make decisions. Now, we have to evaluate what would be an inelastic good, what will be an elastic good. Now, things that would be inelastic would be like gasoline, deodorant, toothpaste, toilet paper, necessities, goods that we don't have a lot of time to shop for, goods that we need, goods that are a very small portion of our budget. Those are all examples of inelastic goods. When we look at inelastic goods, you'll notice that we're focused on how these price changes will influence decisions that we have to make. Now, when we look at elastic goods, consumers are very sensitive to the price changes. And when consumers are very sensitive to price change, when there's a price change, they probably won't buy it. And examples of elastic goods are going to be goods that there are many substitutes, goods that are very expensive, goods that are luxury items, goods that people take for granted in terms of they don't need it as much, goods that are a large portion of our budget. All of these goods are examples of elastic goods. Now, when we look at elasticity, you'll notice that stores need to evaluate what they're selling. And when stores can evaluate what they're selling, it'll bring about a lot of changes. Because when stores understand what they're selling, if they're selling inelastic goods, stores will know if they raise their prices, consumers are more willing to buy the product. However, if they're selling an elastic good, if they raise their prices, consumers will not buy. So these are some of the concepts that we're covering this week. If you need additional resources or help, please let me know as I look forward to your effort this week.